Job lived a long time ago. He was a very good man. Everyone agreed that Job was very good. Even Job. And it was true. He was the very best person in the whole world. Even God said so. Now it is important to try to be good and not do anything bad or wrong. But Job forgot something very important. Job began to think he could be good all by himself. So God had to show him that even the very best man in the world still needs God's help to be good.
Have you ever thought you were a pretty good boy and you never did anything bad? Have you ever thought you were a pretty good girl and you never made anyone sad? There was a man whose name was Job. He thought he was as good as gold, but he found out that it wasn't enough. He needed the goodness of God. Needed the goodness of God. When the troubles came and the going was rough and everything started to fall. When the troubles came and the going was tough and Job was as sick as a dog. He told his friends it wasn't fair for God to put him in despair. But then he heard that he'd better look up. He'd forgotten the goodness of God. With a prayer for others and a little more trust and a look at his heart within. With a prayer for others and a little more faith, Job got better again. All he lost it was return, and he was so glad he learned that all his goodness just wasn't enough. He needed the goodness of God. So if it's going good for you, give the credit where it's due, and keep on saying, I'd better look up. I'm needing the goodness of God. So if it's going good for you, give the credit where it's due, and keep on saying, I'd better look up. I'm needing the goodness of God. Have you ever thought you were a pretty good boy? You're needing the goodness. Have you ever thought you were a pretty good girl? You're needing the goodness. Have you ever thought you were a pretty good boy? You're needing the goodness of God.
A few hundred years after the people of Israel settled in the Promised Land, there was a shepherd boy named David who loved to play music on his harp while he watched over his sheep. David loved God very much and wrote many beautiful songs about God and his people. Have you heard any of David's songs? Maybe you know this one. It's called Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. David's songs make us feel safe and close to God.
When David was a shepherd boy and guarded well the sheep, he strummed his harp and sang his songs as he was watching the sheep. He looked up in the bright blue sky and thought of God's great love, and in his heart the songs were born, the psalms of praises and love. When David was a shepherd boy and guarded well the sheep, he strummed his harp and sang his songs as he was watching the sheep. He looked up in the bright blue sky and thought of God's great love, and in his heart the songs were born, the psalms of praises and love. He looked up in the bright blue sky and thought of God's great love, and in his heart the songs were born, the psalms of praises and love.
The Philistines were the enemies of Israel, and one of them, whose name was Goliath, was a giant. The king of Israel, whose name was Saul, and all his army were so afraid that they ran away when they saw Goliath the giant coming. He was 10.5 feet tall and had a huge sword and shield and carried a long spear. For 40 days he frightened the entire army of Israel. David was the only one who was not afraid of him. But David was just a boy, not a soldier. What could he do?
Only a boy named David, only a little sling. Only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. Only a boy named David, only a rippling brook. Only a boy named David, but 5 little stones he took. And 1 little stone went in the sling, and the sling went round and round. And 1 little stone went in the sling. And the sling went round and round, and round and around and around and around and around and around and round. And 1 little stone went up in the air, and the giant came tumbling down. Only a boy named David, only a little sling. Only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. Only a boy named David, only a rippling brook. Only a boy named David, but 5 little stones he took. And 1 little stone went in the sling, and the sling went round and round. And 1 little stone went in the sling, and the sling went round and round, and round and around and around and around and around and around and round. And 1 little stone went up in the air, and the giant came tumbling down. And round and around and around and around and around and around and round. And 1 little stone went up in the air, and the giant came tumbling down.
Only a boy named David.
Many years later, there lived in Israel 4 young men named Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. One day, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon and his army invaded Israel and captured many people, including Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and took them away to Babylon. Because they were very good young men, the king decided to let them work for him in his palace. One night, the king had an amazing dream, but he forgot what it was. He asked his wise men to tell him what he had dreamt, but they couldn't. So Daniel prayed, and God showed Daniel the dream, and he explained it to the king. The king was very pleased and made Daniel his chief advisor. But then some evil men had Daniel thrown in with dangerous and hungry lions because they were jealous. However, God sent an angel to protect Daniel and keep the lions' mouths shut so they couldn't harm Daniel or even bite him.
Daniel prayed and he wasn't afraid of the king's decree. He called his friends and he prayed with them.
Lord, show the king's dream to me.
Daniel stood before the king and told the king the truth.
I know your dream, and I'll tell you what it means. God showed it to me too.
Daniel, brave Daniel, was a man of prayer. Daniel, brave Daniel, God kept him in his care. Daniel prayed and he wasn't afraid. He didn't think of fear. He bowed his head and he talked to God with all the lions near. In the morning when the sun came up,
Nebuchadnezzar set up a great golden statue. When certain music was played, everyone was supposed to bow down and worship the statue. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego loved and worshipped God, so they could not love and worship the statue. King Nebuchadnezzar got very angry with them and said they must die. The three brave young men were tied up and thrown into a huge burning fiery furnace. When the king looked into the furnace, he saw them walking in the fire with a shining man who looked like the Son of God. The king asked them to come out, and out came Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were not burned at all. Nebuchadnezzar saw that God could keep his children safe, even in a huge fire. Then he told everyone to worship the living God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego instead of a lifeless gold statue.
3 good men lived very long ago, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. To an idol they would never bow, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In a fiery furnace they were all thrown in. Nebuchadnezzar thought it was their end, but God was there, he never let them go. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Three good men lived very long ago, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. To an idol they would never bow, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In the fiery furnace it was very hot, but they prayed and put God on the spot. And they came out and they didn't smell of smoke, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they came out and they didn't smell of smoke, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
The people of Nineveh were very mean and selfish. They wanted to own everything in the whole world. Everyone was afraid of them and their big army. One day, God told his prophet Jonah to go and warn the people of Nineveh to stop being so mean and selfish, or God would destroy their city. But Jonah didn't want to do that, so he disobeyed and ran away and tried to hide from God. He ran down to the sea and boarded a ship that was going far, far away from Nineveh. And away from God, too, he thought. Jonah was in for a very big surprise.
The Lord said, "Go, go, Jonah, go to the city of Nineveh." The Lord said, "Go, go, Jonah, go to the city of Nineveh, and tell them, I'm going to punish them for their sins. Tell them, I'm going to punish them for their sins." But Jonah went
time came that God sent his son Jesus to live with his children on earth and teach them all about God and help them to be kind and good. Jesus loved his Father very much. It wasn't easy for Jesus to leave his wonderful home in heaven and come to earth, but everyone needed Jesus so much. God chose a sweet young woman named Mary to be Jesus' mommy on earth and to take care of him until he was old enough to do God's work. A good man named Joseph became Mary's husband and took care of her and Jesus. God had told a lot of people that he was sending Jesus to help them, but no one guessed that someone as important as God's son, Jesus, would be born in a stable.
Run with torches to light the dim stable. Run with torches, good villagers, run. Christ is born, oh come and adore him. Mary calls you, kneel before him. Come, come, come and behold the child. Come, come, come and see Christ the Lord. Tell the others to hurry to greet him. Tell the others to come to his side. One and all as you come and adore him. Quietly, quietly kneel before him. Come, come, come and behold the child. Come, come, come and see Christ the Lord. Come on, everybody! Run with torches to light the dim stable. Run with torches, good villagers, run. Christ is born, oh come and adore him. Mary calls you, kneel before him. Come, come, come and behold the child. Come, come, come and see Christ the Lord. Come and behold the child. Come, come, come and see Christ the Lord.
Come and behold the child.
Come, come, come and see Christ the Lord. Come and see Christ the Lord.
Hardly anyone knew how important Jesus was when he was a little boy. Hardly anyone knew that he was the son of the King of the whole universe, who someday would rule the world with love and peace forever. You would never have guessed that when he was a little boy, because he was so much like you and me. He ran and played and probably cried when he fell and scraped his knee. And of course he got hungry and tired and had to take naps when he was little. He liked to help Joseph in the carpentry shop and go for long walks and do fun things. None of his friends knew who he really was, but they liked him very much.
When Jesus was a little boy, he lived in Galilee. He climbed the hills and played with friends and laughed like you and me. He learned to be a carpenter and helped his mommy with the chores. He learned some lessons just like me and probably got some bumps and sores. When Jesus was a little boy, he lived in Galilee. He climbed the hills and played with friends and laughed like you and me. Each year he grew so strong and tall. He had lots of wisdom too. God prepared his heart and mind for the work that he would do. When Jesus was a little boy, he lived in Galilee. He climbed the hills and played with friends and laughed like you and me. When Jesus grew to be a man, he traveled far, he traveled wide. He was a friend to all in need, all throughout the countryside. When Jesus was a little boy, he lived in Galilee. He climbed the hills and played with friends and laughed like you and me. When Jesus was a little boy, he lived in Galilee. He climbed the hills and played with friends and laughed like you and me.